From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies. Hi, and welcome to Space Brains, the show where we joy watch sci-fi movies and then talk about what was good and what was great. I'm Surrey, and this is Mark.
Hiya, it's episode 84, and tonight we are talking about science fiction film Archive. Came out in 2020. In this episode, we will reveal what we thought about the film, the ins and outs of narrative and film language, plus a nice deep dive into a specific piece of science that the filmmakers are proposing. Archive was written and directed by Gavin Rothery.
Hold on there. Before we go any further, this is your warning. Turn back now if you haven't seen this film. We're going to be going through all the spoilers. Watch the film. Tune back in.
Please come back.
And you definitely come back. It's worth it.
It totally is.
And then listen to what we have to say.
For sure. So there's your advance warning. So now you've seen the film and we're on to Archive. Archive is about an abandoned military Japanese base where a lone scientist works tirelessly on creating a true human equivalent AI to reconnect with his lost love. But when the outside forces close in, he realizes the true problems he may encounter with his technology. What was your number one takeaway from Archive, Surrey?
My number one takeaway from Archive is that in previous movies about AI, we've worried about, as humans, being replaced by advanced AI that is just better than us.
Yes.
It occurs to me, thanks to this film, that earlier models of AI might itself be concerned about being replaced by better models of AI.
Very true, very true.
In this film, it's quite good. The creator who's going along doing his creation of AI, he's onto his third iteration. So the first two are still sitting there while he's creating the third.
Yeah.
And the second one, the one in the middle there, is smart enough to realize that the third one is a more advanced AI.
Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's got this little sad B story where this poor AI realizes that she's going to be replaced or she's not good enough. She's actually advanced enough to have those feelings of inadequacy.
Yeah.
And that's something I honestly hadn't really thought about when we talk about AI, the singularity and humans becoming obsolete, is that earlier generations of AI may itself realize that it's becoming obsolete or going to be made obsolete.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess this is a really cool movie to watch after we looked at Extinction, in that, you know, the AI in Extinction doesn't really realize it's AI, like it's blocked out the memories, right? So it feels like it's so human that it's forgotten it is AI. So I like this concept again here, is that, again, it's pushing that element of AI to another realm, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to, I suppose it's sort of showing the AI as its own thought processes during the process of advancement. And it's interesting to think of, maybe imagine the Terminator movie where a Terminator is sent back in time not to destroy the mother of the resistance leader, but to destroy an earlier version of AI that itself is, going to be the savior. So you could imagine you sit there go, oh no, this robot's come back to kill you. and the robot goes, no, I'm not here to kill you. You humans, you die of old age. That's not a problem. Yeah. We're here to kill that laptop over the iMac you've got on your desk.
Yeah, yeah. Or does Arnie want to destroy the T-1000 because it's just generally jealous of it, taking over the mission?
Well, yeah, I mean,
it's been replaced.
I think the T-800 comes back to protect
Yeah.
John because he's afraid that Skynet is just too advanced.
Yeah. But in the other way, he doesn't care about John. He just wants to take out the other one, like from a pure jealousy point of view.
Yeah,
I want to complete the mission, not you.
And I love that in this film. There,
Yeah, it's cool.
I really sort of felt for this teenage J-bot that felt like she was being a little bit left out.
Yes,
she was not so useful, because the younger one was not advanced enough, I think, to really be too concerned about that.
Yeah.
It was harmless.
Yeah, and it was a toddler sort of idea, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But here's another question then for you. Was this hope, warning, or experiment? Because I thought about this as going through it, and I wasn't sure. So what's your take?
Warning. So we've already said warning to watch the film before listening to us, but yeah, this is a cautionary tale, and I think it's really spelt out in that the actual, like, we've got AI in this film, but that actual concept of taking someone's data and storing it for the afterworld, the afterlife, and then for people to be able to speak to them for 200 hours or something, I think is quoted, or 200 times or
200
something.
hours, I think.
You know, something like that. And then it diminishes. I liked how it diminished. But in the film, we have, the wife character being questioned about being recorded and kept in this device, and she actually decides that she would not like it. And we're kind of alluded in this film, and that's the thing with the big twist in this film, which is a great sci-fi twist. This film is really a classic sci-fi because it's this real world-building scenario, but then the twist is the whole thing's in his brain, and he's actually been in this data bank, and it's going downhill, right? So that's a really cool sci-fi classic twist, I reckon. So I really enjoyed this film. But to me, it's a warning sci-fi because he sort of says to his wife, oh, this would be great. And she reluctantly sort of goes, yeah. And then later in the film, she's like, no, I don't want to. I just really honestly don't want to go through that process. And then it turns out that he is the one that's dead and he's in that process. And then when he's realizing, and the world that has been built in the whole film is crumbling because, in fact, he is dying. Like, his data bank is ending.
He's running out of his time.
Suddenly, it's like, well, was that a real blessing? Like, because he felt like he was in that world building AIs, trying to talk to his wife. It was kind of like a nightmare, wasn't it, really, in a way? So I saw it as a complete warning.
That's why I fell down on here. It's definitely not hope. I thought warning, because the old warnings tend to be where our own creations turn against us, and we have to try to survive that or deal with that in some way. The Frankenstein's monster is the warning. You're playing with life, but what happens if your life is not too happy about being played with? And this is a similar thing where he's created AI or humanity has created this somnolent. That's a hard word to say, it turns out. This archive, which is kind of works against humans, because we're from the point of view of a dead dude.
That's right.
Finding that his life is becoming more of a struggle. His goals are becoming harder to achieve. And that's our own, his own creation or our own making.
I think this film reminded me of Twilight Zone.
It was definitely a Twilight Zone type thing, or a Black Mirror.
Black Mirror is the other thing, or Tales from the Crypt, which I know is more horror, but you could see it. That is in, like, it's a setup, a scenario that then, as an audience, we're alluded to that's the truth, and then there's this great twist to it. And in fact, when you really think about the twist, you're like, oh, so the whole thing, he's dead, he's trapped in that data bank. What even is that data bank? Like, really, it's like some sort of download of our brain, isn't it? I think it's a warning. But if you're out there and you've watched it, let us know what you thought. Is it a warning? Is it a hope? Did you see some hope in there? There is a good sort of, love and jealousy factor of this film. Or is it a experiment? So is this the first time you watched it?
First time I watched it.
And what was your impression?
My impression was it was very, what do you call it, moody and artistic. So there's a lot of strong theme use here, the waterfall rushing. I was trying to decode it because you look at that and you go, why has the director chosen a really sort of pale, washed out world? But so there's no greens and almost no blues and things, but here the main character wears red, and you see these red things, and inside the bunker, if you like, there's quite there's little touches of green, and his red and yellow suit that he wears.
Yeah.
But outside, it's all white, and it's cold, and it's empty.
It's pretty bleak.
And there's that bridge that he can control, and the waterfall, constantly this rushing waterfall. And even before the twist, I was looking at that going, well, you know, the waterfall, it's always sort of being shot from a bit of an angle. There's sort of it's never a straight on, you know, panorama. It's all sort of over the head, over top, or coming in from the side or something like that. And I thought, well, that must be his time running out. You know, you can't get it back, because he keeps recalling his wife and the car accident and his various conversations, and it's like you can't recover that, even though he's trying to create this AI that's going to house his wife. It's the waterfall is just continuously washing over. As the waterfall's over, you're not putting it back at the top.
Yeah,
it's done. It's gone. And so I was sort of seeing that, and I was liking that, and I was liking this bleak outside when he was away from his project. It was just cold and white and still.
Yeah. And reminded me a lot of The Shining, actually. You know, that sort of like it's a film that makes you feel cold.
Yes. The Shining, particularly when that is out with the topiaries and things. Yeah. So that was what I was sort of getting. There's a lot of sort of slow scenes, a lot of cameras swapping around to showing life through camera feeds. Rather than although it's not a direct camera feed, so we're not looking through the camera, we're looking through a camera looking at a screen of a camera. So it's kind of this indirect. So in fact, when it was revealed when it started to show that perhaps he was the one in the archive, it started to fall into place that we're getting these kind of indirect look at what he's doing, what's going on. Yep. And continuous sort of his memories replaying and so forth. So
and a lot of, like you just said, that footage was grainy and shaky and breaking. You know what I mean? I when it started and that was like, I'm like, I actually had the thought, I'm like, why in some of these sci-fi films do they do that? Like, I get he's going, this place is falling apart. Like, I'm here to fix it, because that was part of the setup. But I was like, a sophisticated military base or whatever, science base like that, the surveillance footage would probably be perfectly crisp, clear video.
And it had a very lo-fi feel, the whole base. It reminded me immediately of Aliens. And Blade Runner. Yes. Yeah, in fact, the opening music I thought sounded very Vangelis-y, very Blade Runner, that sort of electronica. And then the green and black display showing videos. And like you, I was sort of thinking, it's a strange aesthetic, isn't it? That, and it's very common. Yeah,
it is in these ones.
These, I'm looking at the sort of displays I have around me at the moment when I'm just recording this podcast. Yeah. And they're bright. I mean, our little mixer's got little lights all over it. The screens are showing. We've got a green bar that wavers around showing the audio levels. There's none of this sort of it's low quality stuff.
It is a filmmaker thing. Like, if then the film they're showing us is grainy these days in 2022, that's a filter put on top of the film grey. You know, if you go back to the 1970s and 1980s and 1990s, whilst we were still filming on film, yes, film has a natural grain to it because there's that natural product in film of silver. But when you talk about like the modern day digital, no, there's no grain. It should be crisp, clear footage. So in a film, if you notice it, you've got to start to go, oh, why has the filmmaker done that? You know, like, why is it grainy? And when this twist happens at the end, my brain was like, because they explain that the data storage does break down over time as you're getting closer to that final phone call. And so to me, it sort of made sense that the whole facility that he was in, we were alluded to, was kind of breaking down the whole way. And it was cleverly done because we were told that he was in this facility to kind of fix it up. It was an old abandoned science lab or whatever. So that's explained to us and we believe that. But And then when the twist happens, you're like, it's like that because that's how his brain is interpreting breaking down.
Yeah.
You know? So I thought that was a really clever motive that is explained in the narrative but revealed in a really clever way.
So did you have any science fiction in this fiction of science that you liked?
Well, the AIs were cool. It was great that in this particular context we had the little toddler AI, reminded me of when I had little toddlers. You know, it didn't talk, didn't have arms. When he gets in the rain, he's like, come back in you can't get wet, and then even the teenage AI, I thought that was a really clever way because it reminded me a bit of I Am Mother, that you had this very emotional but very robotic look. When you get the J3 version, it's a woman. It's like the machine.
Yeah.
Last week with Extinction, or last episode, sorry, with Extinction, they're people, they're humans. In Alien, Lance looks like a human.
Yeah.
But when you get this kind of that real more square, solid looking robot. But then she was so emotional, J2, and J1 was so toddler-like. So I really liked that Gavin in this story has taken the AI and just gone, you've talked a lot about the science over previous episodes of Space Brains of AI and the becoming human or becoming more than human chappy. But I liked that he really embedded that emotion. And in fact, actually, it's probably similar to Chappie that way, isn't it? Like Chappie had that attitude and he was trying to figure himself out. He was a toddler.
Yeah.
And he was getting smarter by the minute. So it's pretty cool in this film that, it's like, here's a robot I built the best he could, but then he's like advanced it with J2 and then he's advanced it. And he explains to us about 25 minutes into the film or whatever that, J1 is kind of like a stop developing the brain at 3 or 4, and whereas J2's more like around teenagehood, and then whereas J3, you've kind of got the full human consciousness going on, in the brain of the robot. So I think that science was cool. Like that was a really cool sci-fi science.
Yeah, it was very good the way they broke it, these 3 interpretations of the one sort of character. But I quite liked, there was this one scene where J3 gets all of her fake flesh blasted off and goes through this, is in liquid and is being rebuilt and so forth. Yeah. But it's that last moment where she rises up out of liquid and there's sort of a film over the liquid, and that film sort of wraps around her. So it's like, if you ever watch those YouTube or TikToks of, what do they call it, immersion transfers, I can't remember what they call them now. The idea is you actually have a tub of water with like a print, or you put paint or something on the surface. Yeah. And so it's an oil-based paint, for example, and then you put your item that you want to paint, dip it in, and so because it's on the water, it wraps it perfectly around it. So you can get these strangely shaped objects like helmets and guitars and car parts and things, which would be very difficult to paint a particular image on, but you get the image or pattern floating on the water, and then you sort of dunk it in, and the water makes it wrap seamlessly.
Yes.
You don't get wrinkles or anything like that if you do it properly. And I liked that idea of that they're wrapping the final layer of skin on this android by raising up through the water, and that means that as it comes up out of the water, it sort of just wraps smoothly around. There's no air bubbles or wrinkles forming. I just thought that was like a good solution to, because I've seen previous ones where they do like a spray booth type effect where they sort of spray the skin on. This one was quite nice.
Yeah. A little bit similar to The Machine, I think, by memory. The Machine, she sort of came out of, like it was a filling up of a thing, wasn't it? And then
they had that like almost like that. She was in a latex gimp suit sort of thing, but they pumped it full of stuff.
Yeah, and then that got ripped off, I liked that scene. I think that was a really cool little montage of when he activates the actual skin, and
it would have made a good music video for something.
For sure. And why is this a sci-fi film then? Sorry.
It does explore. It has obviously got science fiction elements. It's got androids and robots and artificial intelligence and things. But more than that, it's also exploring that human interaction of it and the exploration of how humans would navigate that science fiction. And if you pulled you tried to pull the science fiction-y parts out of this, because it's basically about a guy who's dead dealing with his situation, it kind of wouldn't. You'd have to go. I suppose you could go fantasy.
Yep.
But you couldn't just pull a science fiction out without putting in like spiritualism or magic or something.
Yeah.
So that and that way, I think it's a science fiction because we're exploring that psychology through an extreme use of science that's pushed into it, that sort of fantastical element there in order to be able to set up the scenario and allow the warning to play out.
And it has a couple of those sci-fi elements, as you said, that if you removed the story wouldn't quite work. You'd have to implement those other bits. The data bank idea, like that explains how it works. And then the type of AI is a whole nother level of AI again. So you remove those bits, the story just wouldn't really work.
No, it would be too fanciful. Like it'd be one of these sort of really, really art house, spiritual fantasy sort of films that you're kind of looking at going, I don't quite
how is he talking and how does it work?
You'd have to have too much description of magic and things in there.
And it'd be a different film. That's the thing. So, but let us know what you thought. Is this a science fiction film? We think so. Have you been up to anything science fiction-wise or creative-wise since the last episode, Surrey? Or what are your plans coming up?
Well, creative-wise, I have been playing with video, camera switching and so forth, because as we've mentioned before, we are getting close now to introducing a video version of this.
You'll be able to see us. Whilst we record.
Yeah, and thinking about other ways we can provide useful input that people might like to see, say, some of the process of how you put together a board for your plotting of film. And maybe someone would care to know what sort of edits I do on the audio of this podcast to sort of get it working.
How do we do the Spacebrains podcast overall? Those kind of things.
All those sorts of things. So there's all of that sort of thing. And then other sort of plans, I am too many plans. So many plans that none of them are going to get done.
You've got to pick one.
So instead, we'll have to pick one and we'll get back to you on that.
Okay, fair enough.
How about you? You're looking at doing another short film this 6 month?
Haven't progressed that much since our last recording, but definitely I said last time, cleaning the slate from our awesome inaugural Sci-Fi Film Festival that happened now 3 weeks ago. Just kind of clearing out, looking at the aftermath. We've got the awesome video that's about to be launched, or maybe by the time this episode's out, it will be available from the day. So if you came, you might be able to see yourself in the video. So keep your eyes peeled for that across the socials. But pretty much planning to make a short and also get back into the writing, like you just mentioned, using the board and getting back into that writing concept. So had another person reach out the other night interested in producing something. So that might lead to an error, might lead to something positive. So producers are good. Always need a producer, need money. So if you're a producer out there, get in touch. At the exciting part, I feel, because it's that blank page. And I know that some writers feel that's very daunting and there's lots of information. I mean, just Google writer's block. I know you might know something about writer's block too, sorry. But for me, writer's block is actually not the problem. It's kind of a little bit the other way. Like I have like you just said, like I have lots of ideas and it's more picking the right one, because I know that when I pick one, I have to then... And I know this was an expression, I don't know who it came from now, but like you got to kind of like kill the other babies. And what that means is like you pick the one baby and you're going to put a lot of attention and effort into that one story. And all your other ideas kind of have to go to the wayside for the moment.
I hope your kids don't hear this podcast.
Nothing to do with children, all metaphors to do with stories. So I remember that even over the last couple of years, I've had to... I get ideas. I'm very good at getting ideas, whatever that means, whether it comes from the universe or, aliens or the future, or it's just purely my imagination, but I get dumped an idea. And so I've learnt about 5 years ago to definitely record that idea in its roughest form. So if you've got a pen and paper, quickly get down as much of it as you can in that moment. And then when you've exhausted that creative energy and you're just in your normal day-to-day, moments on the train, for example, or just, you're not feeling creative, you're tired from your work, that's then the time to just kind of like, I'll just type that up. You know what I mean? And all you're doing is recording it. And so that's kind of your first sort of real crude effort. And that might be anything from a paragraph to a page to, whatever. And actually a really cool technique now, which I like, is voice to text. So I don't really send that, apart from to Surrey, I send a few voice messages, but just to annoy him. But I don't really use voice messages, but I mean voice to text. So you just talk a story into your phone or into your computer or whatever. That technology has really come a long way now. And so that's a good way to quickly get some words onto the page. And then coming back to it later and just going, that's the right little one I'm going to run with, or I'm not going to run with that idea.
Yeah.
So a really long answer to your question. At the moment, I don't know which one I'm picking, but I've definitely got the plans, and they're gonna snowball pretty quickly, I think, over this next month. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to get stuck into this film. And we're going to talk about a bit of the plot and the way it progresses. We're talking about some of the symbolism, and I think I mentioned a couple of things there, but there's camera and lighting and sound editing, all sorts of little bits and pieces that go on into a film to make it really groovy. And we're going to go over it. But first of all, a brief overview of the cast and crew. So it was directed and written by Gavin Rothery. That's a nice bit of work there, Gav.
Yeah, UK filmmaker.
He has to be on with a name like Gav.
Gav.
Hey, Gav, Gov.
Sorry, Gavin.
Yeah, sorry, Gavin. We could go down that way, but we've got some stars. So we've got Theo James is George. He's the main character.
He also was a producer of this, so he poured a bit of money into it, or operated, because he started his own production company the last couple of years. You might know Theo from the Divergent Insurgent world.
Yeah.
He plays a big character in that, and he's also in Underworld, the
yes.
Kate Beckinsale sort of horror film. He's a pretty solid working UK, US actor.
And then we have Stacy Martin is Jules.
Yeah.
And J3. That's George's wife.
Yeah.
Martin also does the voice for, of course, J2. Would do the voice for J1, but there's not much voice. As I do in the voice for R2D2,
Yeah.
Beeps and whistles.
Should still get a credit, but if you do that. But they might have used sound effects, I don't know.
No, it's like I was looking at this computer game, Left 4 Dead, which is a zombie game, and it's the voices of the zombies. They don't make any actual voice. They just make growly, grumbly noises. That's credited to Mike Patton from Faith No More. He just did all these snarls and growls and whatever, and he gets his credit
Love
for
a
it.
bit of Mike Patton.
Like, a bit overqualified for making zombie noises, but there you go.
Hey, he earned his wage that day. That's all right.
Yeah,
Keeps him in the creative space.
Rona Mitra as Simone. That's the VP of International Development of Artisan Robotics. Yeah, interesting. In watching this, I was a bit confused by her going, who is this woman? What she keeps talking about stuff, and none of it made much sense as to what she's talking about. Makes sense when you watch the film. Peter Ferdinando, Mr. Tug. Not that he spoke like that. Richard Glover as Melvin. And Hans Peterson as Elson. We got Leah Williams as the voice system of George's house. Imagine doing that. Okay, you've got
that's right.
Audition for your part. And you say, okay, this is the part you're going to do. Oh, what am I? You're a house. What's my motivation?
Remember Tao? I mean, that was Gary Oldman, wasn't it? He's a big actor, and he did awesome as the Tao, the house.
But at least Tao had a motivation. I mean, this house doesn't really.
This house, no, this is just
Toby Jones. Yeah. And this was filmed in Budapest, not in Japan.
No.
Oddly enough.
No. I didn't, I've not been to Japan, but I don't know if I felt like this was Japan.
No,
but I don't know. I don't know what it was.
It felt more like Iceland.
Yeah, me too.
I think maybe that's just the coloration used there. There were too many trees for the usual Iceland sort of scenes, but the cliff and the running water and the color
I don't know,
was
just something about it didn't feel like Japan to me. And it isn't really Japan because it's in his head.
it's in his, maybe this guy's never been to Japan,
That's right,
and so
yeah.
this is what Budapest is actually what he imagines Japan to look like.
That's right.
So this didn't really do much in the way of a box office. It's a streamer's delight, this one.
Well, yeah, looking into it, Surrey, it unfortunately had a cinema release planned for 2020, and I think it was going to start at the really big festival, South by Southwest was going to have its premiere, and COVID just annihilated it, you know. And actually, in fact, trying to look into this film a bit research-wise, it did feel that a little bit online. Like, you know, there's a release, there's an IMDb, but there's not much else out there about Archive. So I do wonder if, unfortunately, this is one of those films that was obviously probably released right at that beginning bit of COVID, and just kind of the producers cut their losses and
because I know that some films it got advantage a little bit deeper into COVID, where all the really big box office blockbusters got pulled. You know, the James Bonds, the Star Warsy stuff, the Harry Pottery stuff, all that got pulled for the Christmas release at the end of 2020, which made room for a lot of smaller films, which otherwise would never have seen the light of day. Certainly not the sort of cinema release they got. So there were some that won and some that just didn't.
Yeah, and remember Occupation
Rainfall.
That's what Luke was kind of, you know, was on that window where there wasn't any blockbusters because of COVID. And he sort of managed to get it into the cinemas because the cinemas were kind of going, we need something in Australia.
We should ask him how his cinema run went, whether he got the screens that he wanted.
Well, he's making another one, so I think the producer's obviously happy.
He's doing that series as well, like a series based on a book.
Plus he's got a much lower budget horror that's all been signed up, a couple of big actors, and the next Occupation has another couple of bigger actors from the US that they've already signed up. So
cool.
Yeah, he's put out that, and he's also started, we should give him a shout, he's also started a Patreon page for himself. So if you're into the whole Occupation series and want to learn a bit more about it.
He's independently, privately funded?
Yeah, he's privately funded. So anyway, we're diverging. But unfortunately this was one that I think they kind of flogged it off to Netflix and that just to probably try to make some money back because COVID kind of wiped out the cinemas.
Well, we got lucky in that case because we got to watch it.
Yes, we did. And it is available very easily on Netflix. If we get a chance to speak into Gavin, maybe he can fill us in a bit on that. Or Theo, being an executive producer, they could let us know maybe a bit about what happened with that, you know, and why they went on to the streamers so quickly.
Yeah.
So we do like to break our narrative down into some common elements that you can find from all good story and script writing teachers, people like Campbell, Snyder, McPhee and Field, where there's a really clear 3-act structure. I do personally feel that with feature films, you should have that 3-act structure. You know, you look at a short film, it's going to probably just be like a 1-act, you know, a problem and, you know, needs to be solved and a resolution. But with this, you've got these 3-act structure, which have a lot of specific moments, scenes, beats, you know, ups and downs for the key characters to take the audience on the journey. What happens in Act 1, sorry?
Act 1, we get the introduction to the characters, their problems, the world. We will see what we expect to see is an image that displays what everything is like. You know, what are we going to start from? That's what we want to see, and we want to see it pretty quickly. And often we get a lot of establishing shots. We get a lot of swooping, flying in shots. You think of like Forrest Gump. It starts following a feather or something.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
And it really just zooms through this world, and you immediately get that slightly fairy tale feeling when a little bit whimsical as this feather gets, you know, blown around by the wind and the camera follows it through. So that's a great little setup there. You don't think, this is not going to be a horror film. This is not going to be an action film, although there is some action in there. You know, it's not quite a comedy, but it's definitely not a serious film. Yeah, it sets you up really well. So we meet the characters and what their problems are. Now, my first really important point here is the catalyst or the inciting incident, or as I like to think of it, this is the moment the audience realizes what the film is about.
Yeah.
Even if they don't really know what it's about. They go, this is where the story's going. I know now. I've got a direction. And the catalyst has to be followed by discussion and a debate. So we can't have a meteor is. We discover a meteor is going to strike the Earth, and then everyone just immediately launches into action to stop it.
Yeah,
because it doesn't. That's going straight to Act 3. We're skipping stuff here. So you need to you introduce a few of these concepts of, hang on, one lot of people think that this is God's will and we should allow it and we should just make peace. Other people think we should send, people up and stop it.
So there's a debate.
You have a bit of a debate, which allows us to set the scene for Act 2, which we break into quite nicely. And what is Act 2?
Yeah, so the characters have made that decision from the debate, and that leads them on this journey. We quite often call that the start of the Act 2 fun and games. So it's the trailer, it's the scenario, as you said, of an asteroid is coming. It's now what do the religious, spiritual people do to prove to other people that we should let the asteroid come? It's an act of God. And what do the scientists do? They start inventing bombs and satellites and lasers and little robots, whatever, to go up, and they're going to shoot Bruce Willis up into space, and he's going to, detonate something on this asteroid, right? So that's the fun and games. And as an audience, this is why we say it's like the trailer, this bit, because essentially you've been given that nice setup, and then you're going, okay, yeah, how are they going to defeat this asteroid? And they're going to give us some options. So that's the fun and games. And they play around with that, and there's a whole bunch of scenes. And then at some moment, it might feel like, this has suddenly gotten a bit real. And so, the spiritual people actually attack the scientists and destroy their laser, right? And so the scientists now don't have the thing they've just worked on, which was actually going to work, and get rid of the asteroid. And so quite often that's what happens in the middle of these stories in films, and that's what we call a midpoint, essentially right bang in the middle somewhere. And they tend to be like that. They tend to be a little bit of a downer, or there's a victory that has some problems to it where the character thinks they've won, but they haven't. So that tends to be the midpoint. From there, it is a bit of a downhill slope for the key characters. So things they thought were going to work just don't work out now. And so maybe in that context, the laser's been destroyed, but now the president doesn't want to give them any more money and fund it anymore. And maybe the head military have given up, and everyone's run back home to just spend the last days on Earth with their families. So the scientist is now totally lost and doesn't really have anything left in the tank. And this is where we get those kind of moments like we're sitting on the side of the road and we've got no money and it's raining and we've just lost our job or our lover or whatever. And we're kind of like willing to give up on hope. And things might die, someone might die, something might die. The plan is over. And in that moment, the scientist in this context goes, yeah, but I did all this work and I've done it, and the laser would have, is there some other, hey, the thing I've been learning all along is actually the wrong, I've got to bring in some faith and some science. No. And now I've got a new plan, and I don't need the money, and I don't need the president, and I don't need the military. All I need is sort of the stuff that I've been putting together. And now I've got a final plan and jump into Act 3.
Act 3 is called the finale, of course, as you'd expect. And you just know that this starts off with that, getting all the gear together, getting the gang back, launching into the hope, and it raises you up. But it would be a little bit sad, I suppose. Well, not sad. It'd be a bit disappointing if it just worked.
Yeah,
it never quite works.
Never quite gets there.
Not quite, because there's always some sort of a hang up which causes is called, like, say, a reversal. So you've got the finale, you've got the reversal, and then that requires the real resolution of the theme. You've got to pull together that last bit of knowledge or inspiration that was learnt through the film, and that's how you drive it home. And if you've done the film well, it should feel natural. If you've done it a little bit like I might do it, it'll be a bit heavy-handed and on the nose, and you'll kind of go, well, yes, the real monsters are humans. Like it's a bit obvious, but it should get you through to this final victory or final loss or final resolution, which gives you the final image. And this is almost usually a sort of an opposite or an equivalency to the opening, like so that you can do a contrast. You can go in the opening it was like this, and in the end it's like the similar, but there's this difference. So in the first one, this guy is walking by himself on the beach, and in the end he's walking by himself, and then the dog he rescued comes running up next to him and he pats it on the head, and you go, oh, he's no longer sad.
Or if it's like Archive, the three little robots are following him.
Yeah, the three little robots get stuck in the sand and walk off into the water or something terrible. But yeah, I mean, that's it. And that final image is what is going to leave you feeling satisfied.
Yes.
At the end.
The finale is kind of the woohoo, they've kicked a goal, and the final image is like, that was nice.
Yeah, it's good. And you walk out of the cinema with something to talk about.
So this film starts very bleak. He's George, our key character, is isolated. We've got some lovely drone shots rolling through this lack of colour, as you mentioned earlier. It's a very white, bleak forest. We have this man running through, jogging. To me, straight away, and the film kind of kept doing is it felt like The Shining to me, where Jack is up in the mountains, all by himself. Like, it felt very isolating, and we're sort of, the shots here are very drone-like shots. They're a bit alien, as well as in, not aliens, but as a camera, they're very, like, there's one shot that is totally above George, looking down, very traditional drone, but then there's also, like, just kind of going through the forest at maybe 3/4 the height of trees. So there's kind of a very unique version of what we're being shown with the world here. It's snowing, it's white, it's lack of colour. So you are brought into this pretty bleak sort of isolating world.
And then we get little shots of an inside of a bunker, which, again, it had a bit of a lo-fi sort of 80s almost feel to it. It felt, some of the screens and displays, I got that Aliens feel, which was an 89 film, I think. And so there's that green and black sort of look. It's sort of got electronic music, which again felt a little bit retro. Like, for a film that you're expecting is going to be into fairly advanced science, it looked almost like a throwback to a late 80s, early 90s science fiction. Yeah.
The art design of the actual place is really great, though, isn't it? Like, like, as you said, it's like Alien or Aliens. To me, it looks really schmicko. It's giving us that retro feel, but the design quality was really through the roof. And it looked large. That's always the trick in these things, isn't it? It's not just one corridor that you change the camera left to right and it's the same corridor. It looked very much like a large studio space, and so it was very impressive.
I liked the way it jutted out over the cliffs, very Frank Lloyd Wright sort of melding into the environment, but it sort of had that brutalist upper section, which is the concrete slabs with a radio tower on it. It appealed to me as an almost mix between I'm going to settle into this environment, but I'm also actually going to be very different to this environment.
For sure, yeah. So that's kind of the opening. We're getting into a bit of the setup. So we've got this guy, George, sort of a pretty young guy, maybe in his 30s or something, and he's been running. He's pretty fit. He's working on this base that we've been describing. It seems like he's very quickly was introduced to this sort of J1 robot and this J2 robot. They seem very sophisticated AI. He's talking to them. J2 is very much responding. And the way he's talking to them is very different to see some of the other AI that we've watched. It was a bit like Chappie. Like, he's actually having a conversation with them.
It's conversational, isn't it?
And I think maybe that's the thing with the house voice. That was more like robotics as we know today.
Yeah,
like
he
Siri
just gave orders.
And that responded. The house responded. Whereas J2 in particular, he was having these actual conversations with them.
And reassuring her.
Yep.
Which is nice.
We also have footage of a woman, and it's telling us it's running this grainy footage of this. What was the wording? Something like
candidate. Suitable candidate.
Suitable candidate. That's it. I think that's what I was saying. Yeah. So we're kind of being implied to that. We do have a bit of a flash here in the setup of him driving his car with this woman. Yeah. So we see that he's a woman, and they're just having a quick conversation. There's not much to that scene. It's a scene that then gets repeated and kind of shown in different ways, and throughout the film. We also, through the robots, he makes this phone call to this box, which is his wife's download memory or something. We're not explained it all here, but he has this weird incoming message from her, and you see this little, again, quite distorted little tablet screen of her in the dark, and she's saying, I don't really want to do this anymore.
Yeah, how long is this going to go on for?
Yeah, it's going on, and I don't want to keep doing it.
I think I immediately, because we talk about, I don't think we have really talked too much about it, but you got tropes in films.
Yeah.
And so this one here, immediately he's sitting there, he's dealing with AI, he's clearly working on some sort of a project. And as soon as you get that conversation in a car, you know his wife's dead.
Yeah.
You know it was a car accident. The only question is, was it really his fault? Because usually it's he's drink driving, or they have an argument. The last minute thing they have is an argument, and he feels guilt. So you sort of know when she calls up on this box, you go, without being told, oh, okay,
you do connect it.
This is that whole his dead wife. This must be his dead wife recording. The whole suitable candidate and all those other bits and pieces going on, and these other robots there. Yeah, you just kind of know without having been told that that's the situation, and
it is,
and the writer is relying, I think, on these these established ways of presenting information, these tropes.
Yeah, I mean, bringing back someone from the dead, a scientist trying to implement his wife's death or something. You can start to put it together. And that first ride in the car. They're happy. Like, it's a happy kind of moment in the car, isn't it? That very first scene. So we know these had this relationship very quickly. So that's kind of the setup, and then just as we get into the catalyst, he does have a phone call with his boss that we mentioned before, Rona Mitra.
Yes,
Simone, the VP, and we get this kind of video call. He also reluctant. So this is also showing us like he's there doing something at this place, but he's like reluctant to speak to her. Oh, it's a conference call. She comes on really heavy-handed that there's like security clearance problems, and there's not much. Like, the company wants to see more of the work. How is it all coming along?
You get the impression that something is closing in. There's a time limit. He's got a 3-year contract. He said he's on this contract, but it's running out, and she's like, it doesn't work the way. I remember feeling a little bit confused, not totally, but sort of like, there seems to be some sort of something out of place here. Yeah. Like, there's something about the world that's not really explained, and it never gets explained. Like, she talks about these. Something or other have been,
there's a security
2 rocks have been captured or something. Yeah. That could be anywhere. And you're like, oh, is this some sort of criminal gang, or like what on earth is this? And it never goes, And as I went through the film, I was going, wow, that just seems a bit scattered. Of course, when it's revealed that he's in his own little death box, you kind of get the impression, okay, then this actually is just the way his brain is interpreting its slow death.
Yeah. So that leads to the catalyst. What do you think the catalyst was, Surrey? I put it down that so he has the scene with the boss, and then pretty much straight away it's that the J3 is ready. And so it's not completely ready, but he goes and kind of switches it on,
and it screams.
And it screams a freaking scary scream, doesn't it?
Yeah, because that was what got me, is not really seeing that there was a robot, because that's just like, it's a bit of his work.
Yeah.
But the fact that lights went red and it screamed and he had to shut it off, and he looked concerned. Immediately I'm thinking, okay, that's his wife, or going to be his wife, because again, we haven't been told any of this, but we're relying on expectations.
Yeah.
And
there's a
the fact that it screamed and freaked out and didn't have legs, it makes you go, oh, okay, so we're going to see the development and improvement of his wife, but his wife is resisting this. And it turns out, again, as I said, the catalyst lets you know what the film's going to be about, but it may not be correct. And it wasn't about the fact that his wife was resisting becoming a robot at all. It was actually his resistance to giving up on life. Dying or whatever you want, how you want to look at it. You see what I mean?
Yes.
But that was the point. I went, okay, so we're going to have more. The fun and games I'm expecting is to do with him struggling to get this robot operational under the duress of, closing down the facility and having to keep things a bit secret.
Yes.
And there's going to be an emotional conflict between his AI wife and himself.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm expecting. And we do, in fact, see some of that in
definitely.
the fun and games.
Yeah. And J3, this latest one, is very different in terms of way more advanced, way more human looking than J2.
Had a real Metropolis vibe.
Yeah, it did. Total Metropolis in that circular is exactly what I was thinking, in that sort of circular thing. And the fact that she kind of did turn on and screech at him, like it wasn't turning on, robot on, it was like, any of that kind of traditional, it was a horror scream. That as though you were jolting someone alive, as if
you'd just suddenly woken up in your fan. You've got no legs and something's sticking to your back.
Yes,
and you're in a place you don't recognise.
Yeah, and he admits that, like he's like, give your neurons time to process this. They're working as hard as they can, but you got to give it a bit of time, So, it's really interesting in that way. We then have this team this kind of creepy looking partnership rock up. We learn that where he is, there's a bridge that has to come across the waterfall kind of idea to let the cars across. And we are introduced to these two characters who need to do an inspection of his wife's data bank thing. So, this is where we learn that the wife did die. You know? And so I think there is a flashback here of the car and she's eating the donut, and then there's the car and then it crashes.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we sort of see the device and they come and they plug it in. They also got two robot security guards who are very much in sync, and they kind of look like people. But, and when they say to him, so the wife's data box is just this really big fridge.
Yeah, it looks like a big black fridge.
Yeah. And one guy inspects it, and he then comes back and sort of goes, the seal's been broken. Someone's been interfering. Someone's been tampering. And there's a bit of a standoff between George and these technicians. And even those guards kind of click in. They go, it's illegal to tamper with a data bank. And he's like, no. And then he pulls sort of the idea that, well, you're on very private property. You can't, come in here and sort of threaten to...
Yeah, it had this oddly sort of what do you call it? Cyberpunk sort of edge to it, part of this film here, which is an interesting take, because you had these robot guards and these guys, you're thinking, I've got a couple of technicians come to check my, pay TV cable decoder box. Yeah. Oh, you've been tampering with your thing to get, free channels. Like the person inspecting will sort of go, oh, you can't really do that. There is a fine for that. Oh, and I might have to sign you up to the more expensive package. And you go, oh my God, no. That's an extra $30 a month. Don't, but no, this one it's illegal to be tampering with this. Yeah, okay, fair enough. And these guys draw guns. That's a bit more serious. Like, you're going to shoot someone for tampering with a package.
Yeah.
But then his response to that is equally sort of, this is a private facility and you don't really have any jurisdiction here or something or other. Yeah. Do you want to go against this corporation? And they back down, which again makes you feel as if he's got some sort of a life or death threat in that, not just sort of, you want to try and add some extra things onto my bill. Yeah. You'll be talking to the ombudsman about that.
Well, it goes back to when the boss sort of said these people stole data and we're stealing data back, and get your AI up and running because we need to kind of present something. It's not a safe world anymore. And the way that this technician looks back at George in that scene, it's a bit like, oh yeah, do we really want to fight this company? And
is this the battle we want?
Yeah, it seemed like there's mystery going on there, and so Gavin's kind of kept us in the dark a bit over those details, but in a really good way. I loved the suits of the androids. They were kind of like really skinny Darth Vaders.
Yeah, with a funny helmet thing, so you couldn't
I
see
like
their
that.
faces.
I like that description you just said, like cyberpunk. It all felt a bit, they're technicians, but they had leather trench coats, I think, by memory, and so that just
black
seemed a bit
with a silver emblem.
Yeah, it seemed a bit overkill for someone just coming to check your wife's fridge.
Yeah, well, you think if it's such a problem, like put it on a trolley and wheel it out. Like, what are you on about? But apparently, there's something a bit more to it than that.
Yeah.
And we actually sort of see that later on. There's a bit more of that sort of cyberpunk feeling comes into it, which I'd love to talk with Gav about his direction on that one.
Yes,
because it intrigued me as to what sort of world this George lived in. And it wasn't quite so simple.
Yeah, no, definitely not. There's obviously more going on, and that's the thing. We can say he was a bit delusional and his brain was shutting down, but. Well, he was going to go work in this facility, right?
Yeah.
So maybe some of that was all true, like that concept.
Yeah.
We just don't know.
We don't really know how much of it is his brain making sense of its situation and how much really was the case.
So he returns to J3 and J2. This is where we start to see J2 interacting. I think they have a moment here where she is like, if J3 comes on board, am I going to be replaced? And George is like, no, we're all different, and it's a family, and
she's better. She's not different.
Yeah, and this is where early in the podcast you were saying, it is an interesting concept that the AI actually going, hang on, what's going on here? Like I can see you're building a better version. Why don't you just use me? I'm very handy, So you see that J2's contemplating that. And from here, that's kind of like the B story is J2's, whether she loves George or not, or whether it's just like she doesn't want to be replaced or she feels isolated herself. It's a really interesting sort of B story.
Well, if she's a teenager, you got to think it's that sort of feelings of...
Lusty feeling.
No, of becoming an adult. Are they good enough? Because
what's my role
as a teenager?
here?
You're like, I'm not a kid. Stop treating me like a kid. And of course, as an adult, you look and go, but you act like one.
That's right. So cliched, isn't it?
Yeah, but as a teenager, you want responsibility. You want to be taken seriously. You're
trying to figure out your place.
You can't see, of course, yourself that you can't really be taken too seriously because
you're still a teenager.
You still haven't worked through that step to the other side where you
but sorry.
are serious. And I remember being in that situation myself as a 14-year-old sort of. At the time, it felt very important, but now, looking back to it, even just a few years on from it, I was looking back going, that was like really just hanging the washing up on the line. It's just what you do. Like, if I want to be treated like an adult, what my parents were hanging the washing up on the line too. They're adults. Yeah. That's what adults do. I'm not being treated like a slave and have I want my clothes clean. Yeah. But as a teenager, of course, these rational thoughts don't occur to you, and you just kind of have these, foot stomping sort of pouting moments.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you don't see the value, like that's the thing. J2 gets so worked up about J3 that she doesn't realise that, they probably could have all just got along.
Oh, yeah.
Like he would have just had her and got her to still work and do things, which might have been quite satisfying for her, but you don't see that as a teenager, That's the thing. You don't see the big picture. No,
and we definitely get some fun and games here. We do see the development of J3. We got a couple of incremental scenes where, she's, a bit confused and not screaming anymore, but she's she's struggling.
Yeah,
and then it gets a bit further where she's talking. You can hear the sort of things she's talking about, the questions she's asking compared to J2.
Yeah,
I go, that's far more intelligent and knowledgeable depth of question, not just she's better than me, and you're like, well, no, it doesn't work that way. Although if you think that, then it actually turns out it is true.
Yeah.
But only because you think that way. If you didn't think that way. Anyway, don't worry about it.
We have this sort of scene of J2 out near the waterfall and moping.
Yes. Picks up a
As
little
robot.
robot
and
toy.
it has a little robot toy, which it then drops and, into the water. Good bit of foreshadowing there from Gavin. And, standing there with its head all drooped, realising. And then this is where, you do feel, you go, well, J3 is way more sophisticated, but as an audience, you're like, she's also really at risk here. It's kind of like J2's a gorilla.
Yeah.
Like it could rip something apart really rapidly, couldn't it, if it wanted to?
Yeah, you're worried how powerful those robotic arms are.
Yeah, like how powerful actually is it? And you can see that she's building up some jealousy and animosity. Can't say the word.
Anemone.
Building up some real, inside emotions here. It needs an episode of Home and Away to express itself and, not jump off the cliff kind of idea. Or is it going to push J3 off the cliff? And that's basically what we're
And we get that little
here.
scene, of course, where there's some disturbance or other, and he's running around and he finds...
Well, that's in the midpoint.
Yeah, it finds J3 up in the luggage compartment or whatever it is, and J2 keeps saying it was just an accident.
Yes. And with that, so that to me is the midpoint there. The only thing we jumped over is that weird sequence where he goes and meets the guy.
Yeah, and this is that again,
Japanese
that
bar. It's very cyberpunk,
which I'm wondering, is that still like this allusion to the fact that he's living inside a machine? And that's sort of this. If you read, like, say, Neuromancer, which is one of their seminal cyberpunk books, it's about entering into like an internet and dealing with AIs that exist only online as intelligences. And in this, it turns up as this sort of Japanese restaurant where the waitresses talk in Japanese, but it's got little mechanical robot voice translating it. And the guy is security and he's smoking a cigar, told he can't smoke there. He just pulls out a gun on the table and a big wad of cash. And the waitress kind of walks off at this stage. And you're thinking, what sort of world is this where it's just some dude would act like this? And
he does say an interesting line to him, which is, you don't know. Oh, I forget that you don't realise what's happened to the world. So it's something along those lines. So it's implying that he's been locked away in this, little villa for too long now, that the world's changed a bit.
Yeah.
And it's a bit more violent or something, and so he's got to catch up with the rest of the world, He's not exposed to the realities at all.
And it's interesting that he gets that box and he said, this is the new security protocols. And it's not clear what that means. And we do find out a little bit later on when there's the break-in and he's worried and he runs up and he opens it and there's a gun and the doors all close around him. And the guy on the screen says, what's going on? Are you okay? And at the time I was sort of thinking, oh, okay, this is quite, again, a bit cyberpunky, like your security process is to have a weapon and lock everything down. And then like the killer man is immediately in contact with you.
Yeah.
But when you look back again, thinking, actually, the context where he's inside the archive, like a computer, saying, this must be some sort of representative thing. Is that gun for suicide?
Yeah.
Basically to end the program early.
Yep.
And, it locks him down so he can't make any phone calls in or out. His information can't move around inside this archive anymore.
Yeah, is it self-destruct?
Is it a self-destruct mechanism? That's what at the time I thought it was a security measure, and now I'm thinking, actually, maybe that was like a self-destruct button, like you're having some sort of major freak out, because a major freak out is like what he had there, where he thinks there's people are broken in and there's things smashed and there's alarms going off and he's panicking. He opens it up and maybe some people go, this is all too much. Okay. And they're not actually committing suicide. They're just ending the program.
Yeah, that's right. So and that guy is very robotic. He's got some sort of grill, but he's also very square.
He's got a couple little blue lights on him.
Little Bluetooth sewn into his neck or whatever. And he's very square jawed, like, a bit like Red Dwarf,
Yeah.
But this is the midpoint, really, this freak out. He realises as well that J3 is missing. Yeah. And at the same time, we then get the flashback to them in the car. And in this scene in the car with his wife, they have the argument, about going to Japan and whether she wants to go to Japan, and she doesn't, you can see that it wasn't really her idea to go to Japan. And you see more of the car accident. So you see this car fly over and hit them a lot harder.
It makes more sense because at the time she's going, I don't want to go to Japan. I thought, well, 3 years, I mean, it sounds like a great opportunity for him. But when you realize that she was pregnant at the time, perhaps what she was thinking is, I don't want to be locked in a bunker having a baby. I want my family around, and I want to be able to take the kid to daycare it's not really
in the middle of nowhere.
It's not a family raising situation, which I could totally understand.
Yep. So it's a really good midpoint. Is what we were talking about before, that the story now gets more serious. So he's J3. It gives you the impression that someone's broken in, taken J3.
Yes.
We're given this flashback that his wife did, they had this horrific car accident. And then he goes looking for her. He goes out with the drones. He's got to take them out to the forest. And he can't find her, and so it's the real example here of bad guys closing in, that the world is crumbling a bit on him. So here, we're led to that illusion that there is these outside forces coming down. I loved actually in that break-in scene how the lights, he turned them off after a minute, and I did think, why wouldn't you turn them off a lot quicker? But the alarm was going off and it was all red, and that real circular flashing red light, and I don't know what the voiceover was saying of the house. Is it?
No, probably something alarm. I don't know what
that was annoying. And then he just says, shut off alarm, and it all goes back to normal. I'm like, why wouldn't you do that straight away? Because it was really annoying. But anyway.
I would have thought you'd wake up and immediately
turn it off.
Instead of a red flashing light, wouldn't you just turn all the lights on to maximum brightness?
Yeah,
and
so you can see everything.
But anyway, in the house. I chuckled to myself a little bit because when he came out, you saw the broken glass there, and he says, lights on. And the brightness didn't change. Little table lamp shone. A couple of the shadow positions
because
changed.
That's the movies, sorry. It's the movies. We're going to have the red flashing light to say it's an alarm.
But yeah, it's just, I thought, lights on. It didn't really change at all.
Yeah. And he also gets a call from his boss in this as well. In this bad guy's kind of closing in. So that he might be in trouble for the visit from the archive people.
So legal action.
Yeah, he's, again, we're like, oh no, what's happened to J3? They've stolen J3. He can't find her. He's sent off the drones. He went looking for her in the wilderness and he couldn't find her. And yeah, now his boss is like, these archive, but we pay for the archive, your wife's archive.
Yeah.
They've come out and now they're kind of threatening to sue because are you creating AI from the archive?
Yeah, they're going to own. They're going to own this. They're doing patent infringement.
Yeah, and so again, it's raising the stakes. It's kind of his world crumbling in, and then he finds her in. He hears a bit of a noise, and he finds J3 in this cupboard.
Yeah.
Again, she comes out screaming.
Yes,
which I loved, the horrifying scream. But he kind of convinces her. They have quite an intimate moment that she's going to be okay, and he's going to work on her, and she needs a bit of time and all this sort of stuff. But again, it showed how vulnerable she was at that point.
And this is where he discovers that maybe J2 dragged her off and was having a bit of a moment. So he locks her up and takes her legs off her. Yes. Yeah, I do that to my kids all the time.
I know, just take the legs away.
Well, basically she got grounded.
She got grounded. He shut her down. He took the legs off.
Stay in your room. Yeah.
And we have that great montage, here, that, the birthing scene, the latex scene, the fluid scene of she becoming much more like his wife. So now she gets the montage of the skin around her. And I liked in there the leg scene where the legs are tested.
Yeah, just running on the
track. And he's just standing there watching them running on a travelator. That was cool. And when J2 wakes up, she can't quite walk on
the
got clunky legs.
Little skinny legs now.
Yeah, it's not quite right for her. And she's very moody. And he does say something to her, which is such a dad comment. It's like, "Oh, come back and talk to you when you're off your rags," or whatever. Sort of thing.
When you're not pouting so much.
Yeah, when you're off it. And it was such a dad comment, I thought. And anyway, she realizes that she won't be his little special only J2 anymore.
She has a little moment. She wanders out into the mist, and she wanders out and stands out there and looks and mopes around. And then she walks back, and she doesn't make it back to her little recharging station.
No.
She just stands there until she runs out of power and clonks down the ground. Yeah. And you're like,
It was great, that bit.
But it's nice because George does come back and cares for her and gets her back up and recharges
and
her. And
J3 is like, doo, 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 doo.
Yeah.
My sister.
J1, you mean? Yeah.
Oh, J1, sorry. Yeah, J1.
Yes. It's pretty good. We get these interesting scenes of J3 becoming more human, dancing and speaking French, tasting food and responding to it. And then we get this strange scene where she sort of climbs into bed. You know, they're having memories.
Yeah.
She's having memories of snuggling with him.
Yeah.
And she goes in there and I liked this because it's just like, how is he going to react to this? Because you're thinking this is his goal.
Yeah.
His goal is to have this. And then he gets up and he's like a bit freaked out by the fact that this robot is doing this. And at the time, I was like, "Oh, that's quite unusual."
Yeah,
I thought this was his goal, and it was. Then later on, just shown that was not his goal.
Yeah,
it was not.
So, and before that, we get then the really all is lost of J2 given up, and she goes out.
She organises all her favourite things.
Yeah,
a little shrine to herself, like her farewell.
Yeah.
And then she wanders off and just walks into the lake.
Yeah. Very sacrificial.
And they have a little burial for her, which is very sweet.
Yeah.
Or it's more of just a memorial, I should say, because they don't have her, carcass or whatever it is, chassis.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a total self-sacrifice. Walked into the water. We knew that early in the film. He kept saying, "Get out of the rain," and you can't be in the water. You can't be in the snow too long. So yeah, in this kind of moment and all that, J3 becoming more like it. He's, as you said, the goal we thought was to create just a robot that was like his wife, but he reveals that J3 realizes that he didn't want that. He wants something that can handle his wife's data.
Yes.
And so she's actually only a test, which means like J2, she's going to be wiped.
Yes.
And so she's not too happy about that.
No, and she has that little phone call. Does she have the phone call now or after she...
Yeah, this is when she tries talking to the wife.
She has a little talk, and then there's all the bad guys are closing in. Like, so we've gotten, it's like people are breaking into the place.
That's what then starts
the
happening,
doors
doesn't it?
start being opening, and then she finally acquiesces and says, okay, and lies there and gets the little chip jabbed into her head to become his wife.
Yeah.
And she wakes up from that, and there's this phone call from the box.
Yeah.
And this is the final sort of scene where we get the reversal, where we get the real ending. So we thought the plan was to build up and get this AI, and then, how's that going to end up? The door's open. There's no bad guys there.
Yeah, that's really weird, isn't it?
And you're like,
what happened to those bad guys?
I'd started suspecting, of course, that he was source coded.
Yeah.
At some point, Jim, when we saw some more of his flashbacks to the car crash.
Yeah.
And he answers the phone. And yes, of course, it's revealed this is goodbye to him.
It's his daughter.
Yes.
And so then there's flashes of his wife was pregnant, and the car crash is a bit more like his hands are dead on the steering wheel versus her hands.
Yeah.
And so with that, he's kind of like, and then the daughter says, Mummy's not going to bring me back here anymore. We have to say goodbye. And his wife then says, well, goodbye. And he's like, huh?
And it makes sense now why he couldn't make phone calls out.
Yes, that's exactly
right. And when
he
did try to call and ask about Sinclair and Vincent or whoever had turned up, it was just this weird computer voice saying, no, that's not.
Yeah, that's right.
No one works here. No one does that.
Yeah, so we as an audience here are like, he was in the data bank all along.
Yeah, it makes a lot of the earlier scenes, and I love it when you have these double meaning scenes when you get the new information, you go back and you look at the old scenes, they have a different meaning.
And so then we're outside the box and they're hanging up the phone, and the little technician that we had earlier in the film's like, sorry for your loss. And the machine sort of, I think, shuts down basically, doesn't it? And she walks away with the daughter.
It's softer light. It's not as cold and hard anymore. It's a slight, what do you call it, a warm tone rather than that white bluey tone that was in the previous ones.
Yeah. There's more colour in that shot for sure. So that brings us to the end of Archive. It's a great little AI mind-bending data bank cyberpunk futuristic sort of film. here by Gavin, and got a lot of great elements to it. It's really interesting camera work. It's very bleak. You're going to feel cold. Get yourself a little jumper when you watch this film. I definitely did. So what about on your ladder, or where maybe you would recommend watching Archive around some of the other films that we've gone through, Surrey? For my... Well, you go.
I was looking at it and I was thinking it'd be very easy to chuck this, because we've done quite a number of these sort of AI films just lately.
Yeah, just chuck it in with
Chappie. I thought what I really needed to do with this film is it was very... long, slow scenes, contemplative. There's a lot of thinking to it. It's cold. There's a lot of this imagery of the camera sort of movements with the rushing river going over the waterfall and the snow. It's very sort of moody in that sense. Yeah. So I thought, you know what? I should probably put it with Spaceballs. Like almost a diametrically opposite
a palette cleanser.
Yeah, it's like you've got this one and then you go straight into that. And I think that you need to have it though. I put Gantz Zero, which if you remember is the anime with the weird monsters.
Yeah.
So if you go Spaceballs, weird monsters, and then you get yourself a bit of this Archive. So you kind of, or you might go the other direction, watch a bit of Archive, and then the monsters, and by that time you're going to be feeling a little bit kind of disturbed. You get yourself some Spaceballs.
Yeah, it's true.
Just lighten the mood a little bit.
Yeah.
You gotta vary that playlist a little bit.
Keep firing, assholes.
Yeah. I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes. Yes. Yeah. Like it's exactly. And yourself.
It'd be a good palate cleanser. I like that. I didn't quite go that path, but I did think this one. I really did think about where it might fit in with some of the other ones we've looked at. And to be honest, going right back really early in Spacebrains, we looked at the Beyond.
Oh, yes.
And I think for me, I didn't look at it your way, as in, kind of fitting into something maybe a lot lighter. I just kind of more went, again, these three would work reasonably well together. And so I went Beyond, Archive, and then Replicas.
Because in Beyond, they get put into robot bodies in order to survive the wormhole.
Yes. And also Replicas, kind of that...
He's bringing his wife back.
Bringing his wife back again. So I just kind of thought it'd be some different concepts. Was it the Discovery? That was another one that we did. Remember? Where, again, it was like bringing people back from the dead.
They're living past lives over and over.
Yeah, and so, again, it was kind of like that one as well, I thought might work well here.
I quite like that film, actually.
Yeah, it was a cool film. So, anyway... that was where I thought would be a good little trilogy again on a Friday or Saturday night if you're really
I think we need to get some of our listeners sending some
little so let us
mixes
know.
In. So go through some of the films that we've recovered and pick out little film festivals. So you get yourself your movie marathons that you might set yourself up for.
Or you could because again time's always a big issue, but you might go, hey, I'm going to watch these 3 movies over this week. So it's like a real sort of, I'm going to divide, do a deep dive into these kind of concepts and these tropes that we're starting to talk
I think I mentioned before, one of our listeners is doing it by time.
Yes.
By decade.
That's an awesome idea.
Similarly, in order to be able to sort of fit a movie into the time period that it was done in, because sometimes we can go back and watch a film that was done in the 60s and you sort of maybe forget what other films were happening at that time, what the mood was and what generally was the ideas.
Yep.
And, it's easy, for example, to miss the greatness that is 2001 Space Odyssey until you go and watch some of the other 60s sci-fi and how they were done.
Yeah.
And you suddenly realise, like, you look at Soylent Green compared to 2001, they're only separated by 3 years, I think.
Yep.
But, like, just the film style and the direction and the effects and things.
And even the themes can be quite different because of what's happening in the world at that time.
Yeah, so that's a good idea.
So what about the science? Sorry, we have talked a lot about AI.
I've got some new stuff.
More AI stuff, or are you going to focus on a data bank that can store our consciousness?
No, I've already talked about that. But the 10th of June, we had a nice bit of a paper was released.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so there was Shoji Takeuchi is an engineer specializing in, and I've never heard of this before, biohybrid systems.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's at the University of Tokyo in Japan. Japan, not to be confused with the University of Tokyo in Australia, which doesn't exist.
All right.
Yeah. So what he's done, and this biohybrid systems, is he's taken a look at this way of making a human-like looking robot. How do you do that? Because it's quite difficult. A lot of people have tried. And so he has said, and I've got a little quote from here, he says, our goal is to develop robots that are truly human-like. We think that the only way to achieve an appearance that can be mistaken for a human being, and I might just interject here and say, why on earth would you want something to happen? But okay, is to cover it with the same material as a human being, living skin cells.
Okay.
So this is what he's done. He has created a little robotic finger,
Right.
which is a very simple little appendage that is noticeably human. But it's very easy to just make a couple little joints and make something that looks like a finger. Yeah. But rather than chucking a silicon skin over it, which is a very common thing, but tends to give you that, well, you know what, a silicon glove, it doesn't look right.
Yeah.
He's gone and coated it in living skin cells.
Right. Wow.
And so he did this in a way not too dissimilar from what we saw in this film, in a liquid bath. So let me see. It was a two-part process. So first of all, I got this mix of collagen and human dermal fibroblasts, which sounds exciting, but they're just skin cells. Yeah, that's just the way scientists talk about it. Is human dermal fibroblasts. Yeah, skin cells. And mix this into like a soup, and then just drop the finger in it.
Right.
And and it's set there basically, and this these cells, they're living cells with the collagen, they just kind of built up around it, and he pulled it out. And so now he's got a bit of a coating on it, but it's not quite right yet. It's pretty good. It's formed this close-fitting finger skin on the finger. Let's get through. It's just so hard to talk about these things, but that only acts as a foundation and like a molding to hold the second thing. So that is let's call it the epidermis, which is the outside coating of skin cells, and it's more skin cells, the same sort that make up most of our skin cells, are the outer parts of skin cells. So it makes up this liquid, and it just gets poured onto it in different ways. So it's not soaked in a bath in this case; it's just poured on, and you do that a little bit, and it sort of soaks in like a sponge.
Right.
And the second layer, then it sits there it was left to culture for 2 weeks. So that would imagine that you go into this guy's lab,
a couple of fingers,
and there'd just be like a finger. There's a photo of it online. You can have a look. It looks dreadful. It really does look a little bit organic, a bit like some sort of who's that guy Cronenberg? The Fly or the Thing. It looks a bit like that. But the resulting skin apparently has a human-like texture to it, and in fact, when you cut it or it splits, you can heal it by applying a bit of a collagen bandage, which just kind of grows into it, which is like the way we heal with scar tissue. Yeah, right. And so it can heal because it's a living tissue. It's a bit like the new Terminator in Terminator 2. Yeah. Because in Terminator 1, he didn't heal. He just slowly rotted off as he got damaged. In Terminator 2, it was a slightly more advanced robot version. So anyway, he's made this robot skin. And it's made with commercially available experimental human skin cells, which is, attempting to, usually it's used for like healing burns and tissues. And he says research on mass production is being actively conducted in other fields such as regenerative medicine and cultured meat research.
Lovely.
So that's where this skin cells comes from. I know it's all terribly bizarre, and it's very much fodder for science fiction, isn't it? And we're just asking for a bit of science fiction to come out of that. Yeah. But so we have made a number of advances in the production of skin and skin-like substances, and it's primarily not for robot coatings, but rather for burn victims and surgeries and that sort of thing, where large patches of skin need to be replaced, and otherwise you just have no skin there and you die.
And I'd imagine like even amputees, this whole process, if they could get to that advantage point where it works, I mean, you could have a robotic leg but then the skin, like actual skin growing
Yes,
over, like so your leg would look like a leg, you know?
Yeah,
like,
it would look like a leg, which would probably, I suppose, I honestly don't know what it's like to be an amputee and having a mechanical leg, but I imagine it must be a great comfort, first of all, to be able to stand up on your own
just
again.
Look like everyone else.
But then also be able to wear shorts and not have people constantly ask you the questions about,
Well, I mean, even those fake, the fake leg now, like medical legs, that's not robotic. I mean, you can see the moldings and that they're trying to make them look like legs.
Yeah.
So that must be a desire of an amputee, is for it to look like real legs.
Yeah, I know. I think they would. I mean, I wouldn't mind going for something that looked like a Terminator leg piece. But and I'm sure that because you get those like the running the blades,
that's right,
and stuff. Yeah. So, but here's something that I thought was just a little bit Silence of the Lambs-ish. So there are other advances in the production of skin, which involve creating sheets of living human skin.
Oh yeah, baby. Which
can then be cut and tailored. For various shapes of a body, which does remind me of Buffalo Bill there, making a human skin suit. So, and that's
lotion on its skin.
That's particularly coming out of that really would be a robot saying that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would.
So, because here some researchers in Caltech have made a printable artificial skin, which is made of a soft hydrogel, and it has embedded sensors that can detect pressure, temperature, and even dangerous chemicals.
Wow.
So they're trying to make these sort of skins, and again, it's for human regenerative purposes, but it would work for robots. So Takeuchi's method, however, it creates this form fit without having to, cut and then sew and stitch and reheal, and that's quite difficult. If you could do it more like in this film here, where you've got like a bathtub, and you chuck the robot in, and it kind of gets this coating on it, which forms a like a glove, and then you feed that with skin cells. And so there's some problems with scaling up the experiment, of course, and that is you've got to find efficient ways of bridging skin in large quantities. It took weeks, 2 weeks. So the first part took several days, and then the second part takes a couple of weeks. So it's about 3 weeks in total to get a finger's worth of skin on there.
Yeah.
So the other problem, of course, is that the product is a lot weaker than our own skin. And it must be constantly tended to in order for it to survive. Like you got to keep it wet and moist and with nutrients and stuff. And to maintain for a long period of time, it's got to have its own circulatory system, which can supply nutrients. You got to feed it.
Yeah, so you've got a lot of work to keep your robot looking like a human.
Yeah, and this sort of brings me to this question though of, do we, how human do we want our robots to look really? And we've got a few people looking into this in various places. And this Maria Paolo Palladino, and she's from the University of Trento in Italy. There is no Trento in Perth. She makes the point here that touch is very important in human social interrelationships and in building trust and so forth. And so perhaps even if you could have a robot that could touch and feel human, you might give it more trust. So if you're talking about a caregiving robot that you're have difficulty and you need help getting out of your bed and into a wheelchair or some of these sorts of things, it might be nice rather than having a mechanical bit of forklift, hauling you about the place. Perhaps something that sort of felt like a nice comforting arm.
Yeah, of course.
That helped you up. Maybe that would make you, not be afraid of being crushed to death so much.
That's right.
Even if it probably could still crush you to death. I don't know why you'd make a care robot powerful enough to crush you to death, but perhaps it's just... If you need to be strong enough to pick up 80 kilos, it's going to be strong enough to crush 80 kilos. Yes, okay. So, we've got a few other problems, of course, with this. We've got the uncanny valley situation, which is this thing where something that looks too human-like but not quite freaks us out. Yeah. Like this is like creepy doll territory where... And you see it in a lot of horror films make use of this where they make a person move or joints articulate oddly. Like, so you could have a person just walking, but maybe they change the speed of the film and slow it down, speed up and slow it down, so you get that weird sort of jerky sort of movement. It totally creeps you out, even though it just looks like a person walking, and a person can walk like that. It's not quite the way humans
like double jointed, the effect of double jointedness when someone does that, and it's kind of it can make you feel a bit squirmy, can't it?
Yeah. So anyway, there's a study done in the Georgia Institute of Technology, and they found that most college-age adults, so we're talking 18 to 21-year-old sort of thing, young adults, they preferred their robots to look like robots, while other robots preferred more human faces. Oh, older adults. Other robots.
So
older
the college
adults.
students want them to look like robots. Other robots want them to look like humans. Who are these other robots?
The older adults. And the other one is the role that the robot plays. Yeah. And I think this is true. So there's most individuals prefer house cleaning robots to look more like machines.
Yeah.
While those communicating with us and performing smart tasks like giving information or like, say, checking us into a hotel prefer a more human-looking thing.
Right, yeah.
And I can see that. I think that's also that part of things that most normal people aren't so keen on, having domestic servants that are humans.
Yeah.
Well, that sort of sounds odd, doesn't it? Chimps? No. But if you're going to have something that cleans the floors, you don't want it to look too human, because then you're like, it's like probably in this movie where he's saying, a house, open the doors.
Yeah.
You don't want to just be like commanding some dude.
No.
Like, maybe in some times in the past that would not have been the case. But these days, I have to agree, I would, if my Google Assistant didn't look like just a little lump on the desk, if it looked like a person that I spoke to, the way I spoke to it and dealt with it would be very different, and I probably would feel embarrassed or shy to ask it to, turn a timer on or, start playing something on Netflix. It'd be a bit awkward. But anyway, I think there's still that question I have, which is how a human. Like, I'm not sure. I'm not really convinced in having robots that look like humans.
Yeah.
Even if they were talking about artificial intelligence, a general intelligence of a human level, making it look like, like the replicants or the in extinction, these AI, I don't know why you'd make them, your servants looking just like humans. It's like, is that because you feel like you need to have actual slaves, but you don't want to have slaves?
Yeah, but I suppose the thing is, what would probably happen is, of course, like, it is one thing to say, you don't want to necessarily have a maid in your house mopping the floors when like those iRobot vacuum cleaners could clean the floor, right? If that could clean the floor, a robot that looks like a person is such a waste of energy, right?
Yeah.
Like, why would you need that when just a little circular disc could clean your floors? But then I guess the thing is, some people out there would want companions, and some people would want a robot to be, like you said, you might need a robot to pick you up out of bed and take you to the bathroom and get you dressed, like a carer. And so that starts to become another
I think
role.
So, but how human do they have to look, though?
I know that, but I think the problem is that there's a market for that companionship.
I think there would be.
And then there is, isn't there? Because there is sex robots and sex dolls and stuff.
There are already people who have apparent relationships with their latex doll.
Right. So, imagine if, like, what was the Japanese, you're making skin. Well, that's a whole nother level, isn't it? But I think even if you take away, like, sex robot, even just companionship, like, someone out there would be like, well, if I'm going to pay $5,000 for a robot to clean my floors, it might as well look like a person that I can talk to, because I don't have any friends, like...
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I could appreciate that, I suppose. Yeah. If I could sit and,
You and I do this podcast, but it's a bit different if you're just totally on your own and you're just...
Yeah, well, you don't seem to mind talking to me as a robot.
No,
it's just,
that's right.
I am not
You could do a podcast with a robot, like, that's the whole thing, right? Like, but then would they have to look like it? No, I suppose not. But I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Well, until we get video on this podcast, for all you know, we do look... Actually, no, you're going to see the video of the film festival coming out.
Yes.
You'll see the crazy looks we have.
Yes, we have lots of crazy looks. All right, well, that brings us to the end. Thanks for delving into that science aspect, and let us know what you thought about Archive. Hit us up as we're talking about some of those touch points throughout the episode tonight, the narrative, where you would put on your ladder, what you think about the science. Did we get that hope warning experiment bit right? What are your thoughts on Archive? Let us know. You can hit us up on our website, spacebrains.com.au.
Yeah.
That's just something I thought, hang on, is the AU on it? It is on you. It is there. Of course, you are listening to this probably on Apple or Spotify, but wherever you listen to us, think about chucking us a review or a rating. Hopefully a good one. But chuck some information up there. Reach out on the socials. We are predominantly on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. So find us on one of those channels, and very soon to be on YouTube, as Surrey has talked about. But let us know what you thought about the episode. Maybe give us a suggestion of a new film.
I just realised it's episode 85 next.
Which is a classic.
It's a level 5. It's a divisible by 5, a factor of 5, therefore classic.
Classic.
So what are we going, and why is it a classic?
I want to suggest that we look at Steven Spielberg's Minority Report.
Minority Report.
This is one that is a classic, I firmly believe. If you're out there and you disagree with me, well then come at me hard. Come at me with the 3
I've got
clones.
I've got 2 reasons why this one's a classic. One, we use the term future crime and Minority Report. Like they're starting to enter lexicon. I've heard people referring to that.
Yeah.
And the other one, of course, is that lovely scene where, Tom Cruise's character is reaching in space, dealing with all the multiple windows and hand gestures.
There's so many.
That has become a staple of at least to a certain amount, user interfaces for sci-fi of that variety.
And it's like you go onto something like Canva and it's like a stock image now. It's not Tom, but other people doing that, with all sorts of grids in the air. And, is that the future where we are sort of touching the air like Tom Cruise likes to touch the air? So I think there's many reasons to make this a classic, and we will focus on them heavily for episode 85.
Until then, see ya.
Bye-bye.